The microphone screeched as Connor grabbed it from the bandstand, his face flushed with champagne and vindication. I stood frozen at the edge of the Albany Country Club ballroom, watching my younger brother climb onto the small stage where moments ago a string quartet had been playing Silent Night. The crystal chandeliers cast harsh shadows across his features as he grinned at the crowd of politicians, investors, and family friends who had gathered for the Brooks family Christmas party. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention," Connor announced, his voice dripping with mock formality, "I have a very special announcement about my dear sister Valerie." He dragged out my name like it tasted rotten in his mouth. "The one who claims to be some hotshot CEO, the homeless failure who crawled back to beg for scraps at our family table." The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. I felt every eye turn toward me. My mother, Diane Brooks, sat at the head table with a satisfied smirk playing at her crimson lips. My father, Bruce, nodded approvingly as he swirled his whiskey. Only my grandfather, Harold, frail and pale in his wheelchair, near the fireplace, looked at me with concern in his watery eyes. Connor gestured dramatically toward a thick stack of folders on the podium. "I hired a professional investigator to compile a complete dossier on my sister's so-called business empire. These reports will show you exactly what kind of fraud she's been running." He started distributing the folders to nearby tables, his movements theatrical and deliberate. "Pass these around. Let's all see the real Valerie Brooks." The folder landed on the table in front of Senator Mitchell, then Comptroller Harrison, then the Director of State Procurement. Every single person whose signature could greenlight a $50 million contract with my company GovTech. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face completely neutral. Cold, calculating, because I knew something Connor didn't. I had known about this ambush for 3 weeks, and I had prepared my own surprise. Connor flipped open his copy of the report with a flourish, ready to read aloud the damning evidence he believed would destroy me in front of Albany's elite. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The colour drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. The microphone slipped from his fingers and hit the stage with a deafening thud that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. "Valerie Brooks." He read, his voice cracking barely above a whisper that the sound system amplified cruelly. "Chief Executive Officer of GovTech Solutions, current contracts with New York State totaling $50 million, featured in Forbes 30, under 30 technology category, net worth estimated at 8 figures, primary residence penthouse on State Street, Albany." My mother's champagne flute shattered against the floor. My father's whiskey glass followed spraying amber liquid across white linen. The room erupted into chaos as guests frantically pulled out their phones, searching for my name, finding my Forbes profile, my LinkedIn, the press releases about GovTech's government contracts. I stood up, slowly smoothing down my black Armani suit. Every head swiveled toward me. I pulled out my own copy of the investigator's report from my clutch and held it up so the Forbes logo on the cover caught the light. Then I smiled at Connor, not a warm smile, the smile of a chess player who had just said checkmate. But before you hear how I got here, before you understand how the girl they threw out into a Christmas Eve snowstorm 6 years ago became the woman who just destroyed her brother's credibility in front of New York's power brokers, I need you to do something for me. If you want to hear how this story ends, if you want to know what happens next, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because this story is just getting started. And drop a comment telling me if you've ever had to face down the family that betrayed you. Because what happened next that Christmas night was only the beginning of Connor's downfall. Now let me take you back to where it all started, 6 years ago, Christmas Eve. The night I walked away from the Brooks family with $300 in my pocket and nothing left to lose. The dining room of my parents' house in Loudonville smelled like roasted turkey and simmering resentment. I sat at the far end of the table, as far from my parents and Connor as possible, pushing cranberry sauce around my plate while they talked around me like I wasn't there. At 24, I had spent the last 2 years scraping by with freelance web design gigs, teaching myself to code. In the cramped studio apartment, I could barely afford trying to prove I could make something of myself without the Brooks name opening doors for me. "Valerie should come work as Connor's assistant at the venture fund," my mother announced suddenly, as if she'd been discussing the weather. "She obviously can't support herself with this computer hobby. At least at Connor's office, she'd have health insurance." I looked up sharply. Connor leaned back in his chair, a smug grin spreading across his face. He was 22, fresh out of Columbia Business School with a trust fund, and our father's connections setting him up with a venture capital firm where he'd done nothing but attend networking events and post photos on social media about his supposedly brilliant investment strategies. "I don't know, Mum," Connor said, examining his fingernails with exaggerated concern. "Valerie doesn't exactly have the qualifications for the tech world. I mean, she barely graduated from SUNY Albany. My partners expect a certain caliber of talent." "I graduated summa cum laude," I said quietly, my hands clenching under the table. "From a state school," my father interjected, not even looking at me. "Connor went to Columbia. There's a difference in pedigree, Valerie. You need to be realistic about your capabilities." "I'm building my own business," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just landed a contract with a co-working space to redesign their entire booking system. It's a significant project that could lead to more work." My mother laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. "A co-working space, darling, that's adorable. Connor just closed a deal with a fintech startup worth $20 million. That's real business. What you're doing is just tinkering on a laptop. If you don't accept our help, you'll end up sleeping under a bridge somewhere. Is that what you want? To embarrass this family even more than you already have?" Something inside me snapped. It wasn't the words themselves, though they cut deep enough. It was the casual cruelty in her tone, the complete dismissal of everything I'd worked for. I had spent 2 years living on ramen noodles and energy drinks, learning programming languages, late into the night building websites for small businesses, slowly creating something from nothing, and they saw it as nothing more than a joke. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. My napkin fell from my lap, knocking over the gravy boat. Dark brown sauce spread across the white tablecloth like a blood stain. I'm done," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm done being treated like I'm worthless. I'm done being compared to Connor. I'm done begging for scraps of respect from people who should love me." "Sit down," my father commanded, his face reddening. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being honest for the first time in years." I grabbed my coat from the back of my chair. "I've tried so hard to make you see me, to make you proud, but you never will. Because you've already decided I'm the failure in this family, and nothing I do will change that." Connor stood up, pointing at me with a sneer. "You'll regret this, Valerie. You'll come crawling back within a month begging for that assistant job. And I'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you now. You're not good enough. You never were." I grabbed my purse and my laptop bag, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall in front of them. "Then I guess I'll just have to prove you wrong." I walked out into the December cold without looking back. Snow had started falling thick and wet, immediately soaking through my thin blazer. My car, a 15-year-old Honda Civic, with a cracked windshield and a temperamental heater, sat alone in the circular driveway. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the warm golden light spilling from the dining room windows. Inside, I could see them sitting back down, resuming their meal as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. I started the car and drove away. I had $342 in my checking account. My laptop had a cracked screen and a battery that lasted maybe an hour. My apartment lease was up in 2 weeks and I couldn't afford to renew it. And I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do next. The co-working space where I had been doing the booking system project was closed for the holiday, but I knew the access code. The owner, Miguel, had given it to me weeks ago when he saw me working there until midnight most nights. I parked in the empty lot and let myself in through the side entrance. The building was dark and silent, heating turned down to save money. I could see my breath in the air as I made my way to one of the sofas in the common area. I set up my laptop on the coffee table and wrapped myself in my coat. The screen flickered to life, and I stared at the half-finished booking system code I'd been working on. Tomorrow was Christmas. The day after that, I would wake up and figure out how to survive. But tonight, I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The rejection, the humiliation, the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to be enough for people who would never see me as anything but a disappointment. And then through the tears and the anger, something else emerged. A cold, bright clarity. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their money or their connections or their validation. I needed to build something so undeniable, so successful, that they would have to acknowledge it, not for them, for me, to prove to myself that I was worth more than they would ever understand. I opened a new document and started writing. A business plan, a real one. Not just freelance gigs and small contracts, but something scalable. Something the government needed. I had noticed in my work with various small businesses and organisations how clunky and outdated most government procurement software was. The bidding systems were Byzantine, the contract management tools were stuck in the 90s, and nobody seemed to be solving the problem because it wasn't sexy or exciting. But it was necessary, and it was lucrative. By the time the sun rose on Christmas morning, I had a 20-page business plan for GovTech Solutions, a software platform specifically designed for state and local government procurement contract management and compliance tracking. I had identified my first potential client, the New York State Education Department, which had just posted an RFP for a new purchasing system. The proposal was due in 6 weeks. I spent Christmas Day in that co-working space building a prototype. Miguel found me there the next morning, still in the same clothes, surrounded by empty coffee cups and granola bar wrappers. "Valerie, what are you doing here? It's Christmas." I looked up from my laptop, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, but my mind sharper than it had ever been. Working on something that's going to change everything. Miguel, bless him, didn't ask questions. He made me real coffee in the kitchen and sat down to listen to my pitch. By the end of it, he was nodding. "You need help with this. You can't build something this big alone." "I don't have money to hire anyone." "What about equity?" I blinked at him. "What do you mean?" "I know a guy, Garrett Lee. He's a software engineer, got laid off from a startup 6 months ago. Brilliant developer, but he's been doing contract work to pay the bills and he's miserable. If you pitch him this idea with a 50-50 equity split, I think he'd go for it. You need a technical co-founder and he needs something to believe in." That's how I met Garrett. 3 days later, Miguel arranged for us to meet at a coffee shop in downtown Albany. Garrett was 32, Korean-American with tired eyes and the kind of quiet intensity that comes from being really good at something nobody appreciates. I showed him my business plan and my prototype. He asked technical questions that proved he understood the complexity of what I was trying to build. And then he asked the question that mattered. "Why are you doing this?" I could have given him the strategic answer about market opportunity and revenue potential. Instead, I told him the truth. Because everyone in my life has told me I'm not capable of anything significant, and I'm going to prove them wrong. He smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him. "I've been there. Let's build something that matters." We shook hands over lukewarm coffee, splitting GovTech Solutions 50-50. Garrett moved into the co-working space with me. We worked 16-hour days living on pizza and determination building the prototype for the Education Department RFP. Garrett wrote the back-end code while I focused on the user interface and the actual proposal document. Miguel let us use the conference room for free and brought us food when he noticed we'd forgotten to eat. We submitted the proposal on the last day at 4:59 p.m., 1 minute before the deadline. And then we waited. The RFP said the state would make a decision within 60 days. Those 60 days felt like 6 years. I picked up freelance work to pay rent on a new cheaper studio apartment in a building that smelled like mildew and had more cockroaches than cabinet space. Garrett did the same. We kept working on improving the platform, adding features, preparing for the possibility that we might actually win the contract. The email came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in a Starbucks stealing Wi-Fi and nursing a small coffee I'd made last 2 hours when my phone buzzed. New York State Education Department award notice in the subject line. My hands shook so badly I could barely open the email. Dear GovTech Solutions, we are pleased to inform you that your proposal has been selected for award. Contract value $250,000. Implementation period 8 months. I screamed, actually screamed right there in the Starbucks. The barista looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I called Garrett, who was at his sister's apartment in Brooklyn, and screamed at him too. He screamed back. We screamed together over the phone like lunatics. $250,000. It was more money than I'd made in my entire life. It was validation. It was proof that I could do this, that we could do this. We delivered that project in 6 months, not 8. The education department was so impressed they recommended us to the Department of Transportation. That contract was worth $400,000. Then health services, then environmental conservation. Within 18 months, GovTech had 17 full-time employees and contracts with 6 different state agencies. Within 2 years, we moved into a real office with a view of the Hudson River. Within 3 years, I was able to pay myself an actual salary that didn't require me to choose between groceries and electricity. And through all of it, I didn't contact my family. Not once. I blocked their numbers, ignored the occasional email from my mother asking me to stop being childish and come to family events. I deleted the LinkedIn connection request from Connor without a second thought. I had learned something valuable that Christmas Eve. Blood doesn't mean loyalty. Family doesn't mean support, and I didn't owe them anything just because we shared DNA. The only person I maintained contact with was my grandfather, Harold. He had always been different from the rest of them. He'd called me 2 months after I left, his voice frail but warm. I heard what happened at Christmas, sweetheart. I'm sorry I wasn't there to stop it. But I'm proud of you for walking away. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave. We met for lunch once a month at a diner near his assisted living facility. He was the only person who asked about my business, like he actually wanted to know who celebrated my victories, without comparing them to Connor's trust fund adventures. He taught me chess during those lunches, moving salt shakers and sugar packets around the table. Life is like chess, Valerie. Most people only think 1 move ahead. You need to think 3 moves ahead, and always remember the endgame is where queens show their true power. I thought about those words often as GovTech continued to grow. By year 4, we expanded into cybersecurity, offering penetration testing and compliance auditing for government systems. Garrett hired Jenna Kim, a former military logistics officer, who became our chief operating officer and brought a level of operational excellence that transformed how we delivered projects. We moved into a corner office suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. I bought a penthouse apartment on State Street, the kind of place I used to walk past and think was reserved for people who were born lucky. I wasn't lucky, I was relentless. Every contract we won, every client we impressed, every problem we solved, it all built on itself, and I made sure to do it right. I paid my employees well, created a profit-sharing program, fostered a culture where people felt valued. Everything my family had refused to give me, I gave to the people who worked with me. I didn't think about revenge. I didn't plot to destroy Connor or humiliate my parents. I was too busy building something real to waste energy on them. But then, 3 months before that Christmas party, everything changed. My cousin Riley called. Riley Reed was my mother's sister's daughter, a scrappy investigative journalist for the Albany Times-Union. We'd been close as kids before my family had basically written me off. She'd reached out occasionally over the years, keeping me updated on family gossip I pretended not to care about. "Valerie, it's about Grandpa Harold. He's sick, really sick. The doctors are saying maybe a few months. He keeps asking about you. He wants to see you at the Christmas party. I know it's a lot to ask, but he's been asking for weeks. I think it would mean everything to him." I closed my eyes, leaning back in my executive chair, 47 floors above Albany. I owed my grandfather everything. Every piece of advice, every vote of confidence, every chess lesson that taught me strategy and patience. "I'll be there, for him. There's something else you should know," Riley said carefully. "Connor has been telling everyone you're homeless, that you're living in your car and doing gig work. He claims your business is fake, that you made it all up to save face. He's been showing people some kind of investigator's report at every family event. I think he's planning something big for Christmas." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "An investigator? Yeah, some guy named Nolan Hale? Connor hired him to dig up dirt on you. Prove you're lying about being successful. I've heard him bragging about how he's going to expose you in front of everyone at the party. Senators will be there, Valerie. The comptroller, the director of state procurement. Connor wants to destroy your credibility in front of the people who matter most to your business." I was silent for a long moment, watching the sunset over the Hudson. "Thank you for telling me, Riley. What are you going to do?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I'm going to let Connor play his game, and then I'm going to show him what checkmate really looks like." The next morning I called Garrett into my office. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to find out everything you can about this investigator Connor hired, Nolan Hale. I want to know what he found, what Connor plans to present, and I want to know it before Christmas." Garrett raised an eyebrow but nodded. "On it." It took him less than a week. Garrett had connections in the tech community that stretched across New York. One of those connections had a sister who worked in the same building as Nolan Hale. She owed Garrett a favor. That favor turned into an email address. That email address turned into a phishing attempt that I absolutely did not authorize, but Garrett assured me was untraceable. And that phishing attempt turned into Connor's entire email correspondence with the investigator. Garrett handed me a folder. "You're going to want to see this." Inside were email chains between Connor and Nolan Hale. Connor had hired him 3 months ago with explicit instructions. "I need you to prove my sister is lying about being a CEO. Find evidence that her company is fake, that she's really broke and homeless. I'll pay whatever it takes." But Nolan Hale was a real investigator, and real investigators find the truth, not what their clients want to hear. His reports back to Connor were thorough and damning. Damning to Connor's wishes, that is. Subject is indeed CEO of GovTech Solutions. Company has 17 state contracts totaling over $32 million. Subject owns a penthouse at 45 State Street valued at $1.2 million. Company has 43 employees. No evidence of fraud or misrepresentation found. Connor's response email was furious. "This can't be right. Keep digging. There has to be something. She was homeless 3 years ago. This doesn't make sense." The final email in this chain was dated 2 weeks before Christmas. Connor had instructed Nolan to compile everything into a professional-looking dossier, even though the findings proved I was exactly who I claimed to be. Print it on nice paper, put it in folders, make it look official. I'm going to hand these out at the Christmas party to show everyone who she really is. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. Connor was so convinced I was lying that he'd hired an investigator to prove it, and when the investigator found the truth, Connor decided to present that truth anyway, apparently without reading the actual contents. He thought he was going to expose a fraud, and instead he was going to provide documented proof of my success. "This is perfect," I said to Garrett. "He's going to destroy himself." "There's more," Garrett said quietly, pulling out another folder. "The investigator sent me this separately. Said it wasn't part of the official report, but thought you should know. This folder was thinner but heavier. Inside were bank records, Connor's bank records, transfers from Brooks Venture Capital, the fund Connor supposedly managed to a private account in the Cayman Islands. Then transfers from that account back to Connor's personal checking account in Manhattan, over $1 million over 14 months. He's embezzling, Garrett said, from his own investors. There were also emails, Connor to his CFO. Delay the external audit until after the family Christmas event. Use the Valerie situation to distract if any questions come up. And there were more. Investor complaints forwarded to Connor about missed payments and unexplained fund deductions. A memo from the fund's compliance officer flagged as urgent and unaddressed. How did you get these? I asked. I didn't. The investigator did, Nolan Hale. He sent them to me directly, with a note that said, "Your boss deserves to know what kind of man hired me." I looked up sharply. The investigator is helping us. He included his phone number. I think he wants to talk to you. I called Nolan Hale that afternoon. We met at a diner in Schenectady, far enough from Albany that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. He was in his 50s with grey hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Why are you helping me?" I asked after we ordered coffee. He was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into his cup. "Because I've been doing this job for 20 years and most of my clients are people trying to hurt someone else. Your brother is no different. He didn't hire me to find the truth. He hired me to manufacture evidence against you. When I gave him the truth, he tried to pay me extra to fabricate something incriminating." He looked up at me. "I don't do that. I find facts. The facts say you built something impressive from nothing. The facts also say your brother is a criminal who's stealing from his investors and planning to use you as a scapegoat when it all falls apart." "Why give me his financial records?" "Because I had a brother once." His voice was heavy with old pain. "He was a con artist, stole from me, from our parents, from everyone who trusted him. Nobody wanted to see it because he was charming and successful, at least on the surface. By the time the truth came out, he'd destroyed 6 lives. I've spent years wondering if I could have stopped it sooner if I'd just been brave enough to expose him." He pushed the folder across the table. "Your brother is heading down the same path, and you have the power to stop him before he hurts more people." I looked at the folder containing Connor's crimes. My grandfather's chess lessons echoed in my mind. The end game, where queens show their true power. "Thank you," I said to Nolan. "What are you going to do?" "Let Connor have his party. Let him hand out those reports, then watch him realize what he's done." I smiled coldly. "And I'll make sure the SEC sees these financial records." 2 weeks later, I stood in my penthouse mirror on Christmas night. Black suit, silk blouse, red lipstick. I looked like a CEO, nothing like the girl who'd slept on a co-working space sofa 6 years ago. The Albany Country Club glittered with white lights and ice sculptures. I walked in alone, heels clicking on marble. Every head turned. I'd been gone 6 years. To them, I was a ghost or a failure. My grandfather sat in his wheelchair by the fireplace, his face lit up. "There's my queen!" I knelt beside him. "Hi, Grandpa! Connor's planning something. Your parents think it'll be hilarious." "I know. I've got my own moves." He smiled knowingly. "Queen's Gambit, my favourite opening." Across the room, Connor saw me. His tuxedo probably cost more than most people's rent. His smile was confident and cruel as he walked over. Well, look who showed up. I wasn't sure you'd have the courage, Val." "Hello, Connor. I have a surprise planned. A Christmas present." He leaned closer. "You should have admitted you failed. This is going to be so much worse." I looked at him calmly. "I'm looking forward to your presentation." After dinner, Connor clinked his champagne glass. The room quieted as he took the stage with a microphone. "Before we continue, I want to address something important about family truth and accountability." He paused, dramatically. "My sister Valerie claims to run a technology company, to be a CEO with major government contracts, but I'm a businessman. In business, you verify. So I hired an investigator to compile a comprehensive dossier about her real situation. People began distributing thick folders to tables where senators, the state comptroller, and the director of procurement sat. "I think transparency is important, don't you?" Connor continued building to his triumphant moment. "You'll see in those reports that my sister has been lying, pretending to be something she's not, actually homeless, struggling, barely getting by. And I think it's time we acknowledge the truth about—" "Connor!" Senator Mitchell stood, folder open expression, confused. "This report says your sister's company has $50 million in state contracts." Connor's smile faltered. "What?" Comptroller Harrison stood. "It also says she's featured in Forbes 30 Under 30, this year's list." Connor grabbed the folder on the podium, the one he'd never actually read. His face shifted from confusion to horror as he flipped through pages documenting my success, my revenues, my contracts, my credentials. The investigator's conclusion blazed in bold on the final page. Subject's claims of being a successful CEO are accurate and verified. No evidence of fraud or deception found. The microphone fell from his hand and cracked against the stage. In the ringing silence, I stood up. All eyes turned to me. I pulled my own copy of the report from my clutch and held it up, Forbes logo, gleaming. Then I smiled at my brother, not warmly, the cold smile of a predator who had just won. "Thank you, Connor, for the thorough introduction. I couldn't have verified my credentials better myself." I turned to address the room. "For those who are interested, GovTech Solutions specializes in government procurement software and cybersecurity compliance. We currently serve 6 state agencies and are expanding our services. Senator Mitchell, Comptroller, Harrison, Director Jang, I'd love to schedule meetings with your offices in the new year to discuss upcoming projects." They nodded, several of them already pulling out business cards. My mother's face had gone white. My father looked like he'd been struck by lightning. And Connor stood frozen on that stage, staring at the report in his hands, like it might suddenly change if he looked hard enough. But I wasn't done. Because this wasn't just about proving I was successful. It was about making sure Connor never had the power to hurt anyone else the way he'd tried to hurt me. I turned back to Connor. "There is something in that report you should be concerned about, though. Check the appendix." Connor flipped to the back of the folder with shaking hands. I knew what he was seeing. The financial records, the transfers to the Cayman Islands, the investor complaints, the compliance violations. His face went from white to green. My cousin Ryan, the family lawyer and Connor's perpetual defender, grabbed a folder from the nearest table and flipped to the appendix. He read it, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. "Connor, what the hell is this?" "Ryan, don't," Connor started. But Ryan was already reading aloud, his voice cutting through the murmurs in the room. "Suspicious financial transfers totaling $1.2 million from Brooks Venture Capital to offshore accounts. Multiple investor complaints regarding unauthorized fund withdrawals. Pending investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for securities fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and potential money laundering violations." The room exploded. Investors stood up, pulling out phones. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father dropped his whiskey glass, and it shattered on the floor, the sound, like a gunshot in the chaos. And then the doors at the back of the ballroom opened. 2 people in dark suits walked in, badges clipped to their belts. SEC enforcement agents. I'd called them earlier that day, anonymously suggesting they might want to attend the Brooks family Christmas party, that there might be someone worth investigating in attendance. "Connor Brooks!" one of the agents called out. "SEC Enforcement Division, we need you to step away from the podium and keep your hands where we can see them." Connor looked at Ryan desperately. "Ryan, do something! Tell them this is a mistake!" Ryan closed the folder and set it down on the table. "I don't represent criminals, Connor. You're on your own." My grandfather, who had been watching everything with bright, sharp eyes despite his frailty, said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Checkmate!" The agents approached Connor, who had gone completely still. One of them pulled out handcuffs. The other read him his rights in a flat, professional tone that somehow made everything more real. "Connor Brooks, you are being detained for questioning regarding potential securities violations. You have the right to remain silent." The orchestra had stopped playing Silent Night halfway through the third verse. Guests were backing away, creating a path for the agents to lead Connor off the stage. He walked past me, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. For just a moment, our eyes met. I didn't gloat, I didn't smile. I just looked at him with the same cold indifference he'd shown me for years. The agents escorted Connor out of the ballroom. My mother burst into tears. My father stood frozen, his face red with rage and humiliation. Around the room, people were pulling out their phones, already texting and calling and posting about what they'd just witnessed. The Brooks family scandal of the decade unfolding in real time at a Christmas party. Riley appeared at my elbow. "Holy shit, Valerie!" "Yeah." "Did you plan all of this?" "I planned to attend a Christmas party for Grandpa. Connor planned the rest. I just helped him execute his vision." Senator Mitchell approached me, his expression a mix of admiration and wariness. "Ms. Brooks, that was quite a show. I think we definitely need to have that meeting in January." "I look forward to it, Senator." Over the next hour, nearly every person of importance in that room came to talk to me. Senators, directors, commissioners. They wanted to discuss contracts, projects, collaborations. They wanted to distance themselves from Connor while associating with me. It was mercenary and calculating, and I understood it completely because I'd learned to speak their language. Business wasn't personal until you made it personal, and Connor had made it very, very personal. Finally, I made my way back to my grandfather. He was still in his wheelchair by the fireplace, but his eyes were bright and alert. "You learned well, Queen." I knelt beside him again. "I learned from the best." "You did more than win, Valerie. You played the long game. You built something real while Connor was building a house of cards. When the storm came, his house fell and yours stood strong. That's the lesson. Real power doesn't come from what you take from others. It comes from what you build for yourself." I held his hand, this frail old man who had been the only one to see me as more than a disappointment. "Thank you for always believing in me." "I didn't just believe in you, sweetheart. I knew. From the moment you walked out that door 6 years ago, I knew you'd come back a queen." I left the party an hour later. My parents didn't speak to me. Most of the extended family avoided looking at me. But Riley walked out with me, and as we stood in the cold December air waiting for the valet to bring my car, she said, "You know this is going to be the biggest story in Albany, right? My editor is going to want me to write about it." "I know." "Are you okay with that?" I thought about it. About the girl who had slept on a sofa with $300 and a dream. About the years of 16-hour days and ramen dinners and slowly building something from nothing. About the family who had written me off and the grandfather who had taught me to play chess. "Write it," I said. "Tell the whole story, because maybe someone else out there needs to hear that you can walk away from people who don't value you and still build something beautiful." 3 months later, I got a phone call at 1 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Val, it's Connor." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "How did you get this number?" "Riley gave it to me. Please don't hang up. I just need 5 minutes." "You have 2. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. You were right about all of it. The fund collapsed. The investors are suing me. The SEC banned me from the industry for 10 years. I lost everything. The apartment, the car, everything. I'm staying in a motel in Schenectady. Mom and Dad won't return my calls. Ryan won't help me. I have nobody left." I listened, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no sympathy, nothing. "I need your help, Val. Just a loan. $50,000 to hire a better lawyer and maybe restart somewhere. Your family. You're my sister. You owe me that much." And there it was. After everything, he still thought I owed him something. "I don't owe you anything, Connor. You made your choices. You have to live with the consequences. What you did was illegal and immoral, and you did it because you were so focused on destroying me that you destroyed yourself instead. So you're just going to let me fail after everything this family did for you?" This family did nothing for me except teach me who I never want to become. Goodbye, Connor. I hung up, blocked the number, and went back to sleep. The next morning, I read in the Albany Times-Union that Connor had been formally charged with multiple counts of securities fraud and embezzlement. The trial was expected to last months. I felt nothing. No joy, no anger, no vindication. He was simply the consequence of his own actions, and I had moved on. 6 months after that Christmas party, I appeared on the cover of Forbes. The headline read, "From Homeless to CEO, the Rise of Valerie Brooks and GovTech Solutions." Riley had written a companion piece for the Times-Union that went viral, telling the full story of my journey. Interview requests flooded in, but I was selective. I only talked to outlets that wanted to focus on the business, on the innovation, on the lessons learned. I refused to make the story about Connor's downfall. That was his story. Mine was about building something that mattered. GovTech expanded into 3 more states. We hired 50 more employees. I started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying technology. And I made sure every single person who worked for me knew they were valued, that their contributions mattered, that they were more than just cogs in a machine. My grandfather passed away 8 months after that Christmas party. I was with him when he went, holding his hand in his hospice room. His last words to me were, "You played a beautiful game, my queen. Now teach others how to play." I spoke at his funeral, which my parents attended, but didn't speak at. Connor was still awaiting trial and didn't come. I talked about the chess lessons, about strategy and patience, about thinking 3 moves ahead, about how the endgame reveals who you really are. I didn't mention my parents or Connor once. They weren't part of the story that mattered. Now, a year and a half after that Christmas party, I stand in my corner office overlooking the Hudson River. GovTech has contracts in 7 states. We employ over 200 people. I've been invited to speak at tech conferences, to advise on government innovation, to mentor young entrepreneurs. On my desk is a photo of me and Grandpa Harold taken at one of our diner lunches, salt shakers arranged in chess positions between us. I learned something through all of this. Real success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about knowing your worth even when nobody else sees it. It's about walking away from people who diminish you and building something so undeniable that they have to acknowledge it. But more than that, it's about building that thing for you, not for them. Would I go back and change anything? Would I try to reconcile with my family, to rebuild those broken bridges? No, because some bridges are supposed to burn. Some relationships are meant to end. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the permission to walk away from people who will never see your value, even when it's staring them in the face. My father called me once about a year after the Christmas party. He said he wanted to apologize to rebuild our relationship. But then he asked if I could help Connor with his legal fees. That was the real reason for the call. Not remorse, not love, just another attempt to extract something from me. I told him no and hung up. I haven't heard from him since. My mother sent a card on my birthday. It said, "We're proud of what you've accomplished." No apology, no acknowledgement of the years of cruelty and dismissal. Just a generic statement that allowed her to pretend she'd always supported me. I recycled the card without responding. Connor is serving a 7-year sentence in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. I know this only because Riley told me. I don't follow his case. I don't think about him. He's a closed chapter in a book I'm no longer reading. What I think about instead is the young woman who might be sitting in a co-working space right now wondering if she'll ever be enough. I think about the person who just walked away from a toxic family on Christmas Eve, terrified and broke and unsure if they made the right choice. I think about everyone who has ever been told they're not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. And I want them to know this. You are enough. You always were. The people who can't see that are revealing their own limitations, not yours. Walk away if you need to. Build something beautiful. And never ever let someone else's inability to see your value determine your worth. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between staying in a relationship that was killing you slowly or walking away into an uncertain future? Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who should have seen it all along? What would you do if your family tried to sabotage your success out of jealousy and spite? Drop your story in the comments, hit that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe because I'm going to keep sharing stories about people who refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. People who walked away from toxicity and built empires from nothing. People who learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's building a life so fulfilling that you stop thinking about the people who doubted you. Because in the end, the queen always controls the endgame, and I played mine perfectly.